So good evening and welcome once again. My apologies to those that tried to connect to us via Facebook Live. There's an account credentials issue between Zoom and the particular account used to establish Broward Astronomy's Facebook page. And I will, after, I don't know, half an hour of playing with it, was unable to get it resolved. So I will do that offline and we'll continue on with this evening's discussion. Tonight's discussion is the extraterrestrial perspective. This is essentially if you were to place yourself in the shoes of an extraterrestrial attempting to understand the Earth and its population and its social customs and try and understand whether it's the right time or not to make first contact. And if not, why not? And then maybe if there's something the human species has to do before it would make sense to allow first contact to take place, and what do they do in the meantime? So ought to be interesting. It's a discussion, but first we go with the news. So the James Webb Space Telescope has passed its final set of ground-based testing, and they've buttoned it up, as the saying goes, and are going to be shipping it to South America. And I originally thought they were going to be shipping it from California, but it sounds more like they're going to be shipping it from somewhere in the northeastern part of the United States, which means the Panama Canal hop to the northern part of South America is no longer on the table. And as usual, they're not telling us the timeline for when the ship is leaving and when the ship is arriving, to avoid any potential hostage negotiation for the billion-dollar telescope with sea pirates. So coming up on September 14th, there will be an opposition of the planet Neptune. Opposition is when kind of the Earth is in the middle, the sun's behind us, and the planet we're talking about is in front of us. If the sun's behind us, that means it's going to be dark. But if the sun is directly behind us, that's going to be around middle of the night. And even though it's at opposition, it's not at that date going to be its closest to us. So it will be a tiny blue dot that we with a lower power telescope. And they've gone back and looked at the data that they have for exoplanets and realized that the ones that they think are dark may actually be dark, not because they're, let's say, on the borderline of dead planets or failed brown dwarf stars. They may actually be planets that have a lot of water. And the water is dark because the water is going to take the heat in and make it look dark and infrared. And a lot of these observations have been done in infrared so far. And the James Webb Space Telescope is going to be no different. So a lot of these dark places that they're calling Hyceans may be dark because they have a lot of water, high oceans, exoplanets. So we'll see in the next coming years as to whether these things, when they get some sunlight behind them and their sunlight goes through the surface of their ocean and winds up in our spectrographs on board James Webb Space Telescope, if that's, hey, there be water there. So we shall see.
If they have water on a planet that's called a dwarf planet right now, would they change the definition if we found life on that planet?
That's one of those questions that I find amusing. There are a number of things in the current definition of a dwarf planet that all we need is a couple of more observations and who you calling dwarf? So if you happen to find life, even though it's not sentient human life, but it's, let's say, under ocean sea anemones or sea cucumbers or something like that, you find that on a place like Enceladus, which is a small moon. If you find that kind of life there, well, what does that say about the other things that are dwarf planets that we know might have water on them? Still going to call them dwarf? And what about the team of Dr. Brown, who is saying there's at least one more very large planet out there in the Kuiper Belt that can account for some of the perturbations of the orbits of some of the long duration dwarf planets in the Kuiper Belt, and that means someday we're likely to find something the size of Neptune out in the Kuiper Belt. That's a planet that would be bigger than Earth. We're still going to call it dwarf. And the best one I always have is one of the characteristics for it being a dwarf planet and not a regular planet is that it hasn't cleared out its orbital path. Well, we're going to send a space probe to the orbit of the planet Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, to examine its Trojan asteroids, which says, oh, Jupiter hasn't cleared its orbital path of debris. So I guess that must mean Jupiter's a dwarf planet. So I think sometime in the future, those folks that make such definitions will need to reevaluate it. I'm fine with them saying that they're just Kuiper Belt objects and not calling them planets at all, or trans-Neptunian objects, because sometimes they go inside the orbit of the planet Neptune. But in science, things are supposed to change. They don't call it flip-flopping, they call it reevaluating our prior stance based upon new anecdotal evidence or new empirical results or any of those sorts of things. But basically, we didn't know back then, now we know, we're going to change things up. Okay, that's good. That's how science works. Speaking of that's how science works, the gravitational wave observatories of LIGO and Virgo have put their data sets together and found that if gravitational waves were stronger or weaker than they're detecting them, then that means that cosmic strings should have been forming earlier or later in the advancement of the universe. So they've established some, as they say, new constraints on cosmic strings. Of course, it's all predictive. It's not, it's sort of taking the observational data and coming back with a conclusion that fits the data, as opposed to putting out a postulate and then finding the observational data that matches it. This is working backwards. But I'm just glad to see that they're finally coming to grips with cosmic strings. That's why I continue to refer to it as the silly string theory. And for those people that want to stay up in the wee hours of the morning, at 3:15 a.m., SpaceX will be doing their second attempted launch of their commercial resupply services number 23 to the International Space Station. They're bringing water, some test instruments, a robotic arm, a new kind of robotic arm, and a bunch of other stuff, a few tons
Is that today?
of things. That's 3:15 a.m. I think it's Sunday morning. So it's 3:15 early
Today.
tomorrow. And if you thought it was only SpaceX that had things that go boom, there's another spaceflight program called Astra that attempted to launch something this evening at 6:35 p.m. And it kind of went up, went over sideways a little bit, and then went up further for about 2 minutes. And then the launch director said, detonate, because you were watching the video and the video was zooming around, then around, then around, right about the time that the first stage should have separated from the second stage. And my guess is the first stage didn't quite fully separate from the second stage. The second stage ignited and acted as a sideways thrust, but the video is of it launching. And it'll go up another few seconds. And when you see it, the kind of big cloud of, it looks like it's going to fall over, and then it moves sideways. And then it clears the clouds. They tilt the camera up and it clears the clouds. And you see it kind of, where is it? Where is it? There it is. And it's going sideways. And then it kind of hovers for a few seconds. And then it starts going up again. So anyway, the Astra rocket failed to reach its target altitude in space. And they detonated it. As I say, the flight was terminated 2.5 minutes after launch. So we'll see when they try it again. And I hope that the objects that they had on top of the rocket were well insured for replacement and it won't take too long to replace them. And in the ever-ending saga between Amazon, Blue Origin, and SpaceX, Amazon is complaining to the FCC, said, we would like to start using lasers between our satellites as a kind of a second-generation satellite to allow us to make the transfer time shorter. So the transit delay would be shorter. So instead of it going up, down to a ground station, over the ground, and then maybe back up to another satellite to get back down to somewhere else, they can go from the ground station at your house up to a satellite, and then via laser over to another satellite and to a ground station that is very near the cloud server location that you want to communicate with. So it would literally knock maybe hundreds of milliseconds off of your end-to-end transfer time. And that would be a difficult challenge for Blue Origin because they're not going to put up as many satellites as Starlink. So if you can't do better than your competition, what's your approach to dealing with them? Raise a stink, and if that fails, sue them. Have lawyers work it out. So I think that's the next step you're going to see, is that Amazon will try and create an injunction against SpaceX Starlink for no reason other than you're changing things. Yeah, we're allowed to do that. We're a technology company. This is not what you originally told the FCC. Yeah, we filed a new request with the FCC, and it's up to the FCC to decide if what we're doing is good or not. If it meets the guidelines and the rules, then why wouldn't they approve it? And the other thing that people aren't aware of is that the military has looked at Starlink and said, we're looking for a low transfer time satellite communication system for military use. Because right now, all the military communication satellites are geostationary, which means, they're at 23,000 miles up, and it takes a lot of time for the speed of light radio wave to get there and then come back down. So if it doesn't have to go up as high because Starlink satellites are in low Earth orbit, and it can go from satellite to satellite via a direct laser link and then down to a ground station at the destination, that's going to make the military's transfer time for data much less, and that's good. So it may be that the US government has a vested interest or skin in the game, as they say, to making sure that Amazon Blue Origin doesn't, through some legal shenanigans, hamper Starlink, unlike the hampering that the US auto industry is trying to do to Tesla by way of, there was that US Auto Day kind of thing for EVs, and Tesla was not invited. The largest electric car manufacturer in the United States that builds them in the United States. And speaking of Tesla, for those people that are into, let's just say, electric vehicles, drag racing, and watching one car either beat another car by a tiny fraction of a second or watch one car blow up its engine, there's a YouTube channel called the Tesla Plaid channel, having no actual relationship with Tesla to what I can tell. This is just a dragster guy that bought himself a Tesla Model S Plaid straight off the stock. It's a stock Tesla Model S Plaid, and he takes it out to the track and goes up against all comers. And so far, all comers have been losing. And the track actually told him, you're going to have to tone it down. What? There's a new rule by the National Hot Rod Association for stock vehicles. I guess it's specifically designed to allow ICE vehicles, internal combustion vehicles, to take on things like a Tesla Plaid. And his vehicle is now limited to, you cannot go faster in the quarter mile than 150 miles per hour. And you cannot go faster in the quarter mile with a quarter mile end-to-end time of less than 9.9 seconds. And he actually blew through both of those numbers And that's how he knew about the limitations. They said, if you want to go any faster or take less time on the quarter mile, you're going to need a parachute and a roll cage. Thinking that, well, nobody's going to do that to a Tesla. Apparently, they don't know this guy well enough. He's got money. He's been a high-performance dragster driver for a number of years, so he can afford the big toys. And so he said, no problem. And he ordered another Tesla, Model S Plaid. And this one, courtesy of a Tesla-authorized aftermarket add-on, will include a roll cage and a parachute. So then it'll be like, now what do you want me to do? Because now it can go faster and take less time and further blow away these internal combustion engine vehicles. It's really funny. The Tesla vehicles have regenerative braking. So if you're going along and you want the car to start to slow down, and the way it slows down is by transferring some of the wheel turn energy into electrical energy, the motors flip and become generators to put power back into the batteries, which obviously is a drag and starts to slow the vehicle down, but it's adjustable. So you can slow the vehicle down just a touch, not as if you put your foot on the brake. It's not that slow, it's just a little. And when you do that, since the car slows down a little bit, the brake lights come on. So it's really funny to watch this car go down the quarter mile. And when he sees he's too far out ahead of his internal combustion engine competition, you see the brake lights come on because he's feathering the accelerator to not go out too far ahead of them. He doesn't mind beating them by a fender or maybe, quarter to a half a car length. But if he goes out too fast against them and they happen to have a very souped up engine, then he could be breaking the rules and could find himself ejected from the drag strip. Now there's two drag strips near where he lives. There's one in Bradenton and one in it's not Pembroke Pines. There's another Pines over on the west coast of Florida. It's in Pinellas County, I think it is. But anyway, the other drag strip is a 1/8 mile drag strip. And in 1/8 of a mile, they just don't think you're going to get going fast enough. So there are no upper limits. So he has no problem with getting to 140 plus miles an hour in 1/8 of a mile. But now he has to apply the brakes hard, and he's concerned about burning up his brakes. Okay, and I did post the Stuff Overhead video from last week on the Broward Astronomy YouTube site. So if people missed it last week, such as Joanne, and you've got an hour or so to spare, you can learn about Zemdar satellites. So that's all the news items I had. Does anybody have any other news items? Tonight's presentation is the Extraterrestrial Perspective. So this is a thought experiment, which that means there's not going to be many pictures. See if you see even one. So this will be an introspective analysis of the human species and behaviors. Basically holding up a mirror to humans and then looking at us as if we were from somewhere else looking at humans. So hopefully it'll be eye-opening. Maybe it'll change the way that people think about things in the future, assuming that they get the point. And I found in the last few years that analogy is lost on some people. I'll say something and I know it's an analogy for it, and they'll go, well, what's that got to do with it? You missed the point. Okay. So how do I come by this perspective? As most of you know, I'm de polymath, which means I study anything and everything to the nth degree. It's not like the majority of people. Someday I will see if I'm on the spectrum, as they say. A lot of adults are finding out, I've been on the spectrum all my life and didn't realize it. Yeah, that's why your behavior is a little unusual. But since I study everything of everything, as I said, it's probably why I'm still single, is nobody could withstand the scrutiny. They wouldn't want the spotlight on them to that level of detail. But I do it simply as a matter of understanding and simply comparison. It's not disparagement of any kind. If I say something like, your hair was longer before, that doesn't mean I don't like it shorter. I've analyzed many of the non-human life forms on the planet. There's all kinds of stuff living here with us. Mammals, insects, birds, fish, worms, bacteria, and viruses. And all of them have interesting traits, so I can compare them against how humans behave. But I also look at it as, and how did they come by those traits? Was it simply a matter of survivability, or did they use that trait as an intelligent means of shaping their environment? And I've also done this with prior civilized groups of people on this planet, sort of earlier man kind of things. Another way I get to this is my career is in software engineering, and I've studied a lot of very large scale systems and observing how small things can make large effects in systems. And I've watched the advancements over the years of computers, robotics, artificial intelligence, and it's amazing to me how little is actually required of computers before people start treating automation as if it was intelligent. I've taught my Amazon Alexa to use my name when I give it certain commands. Like when I say, I'm leaving, and I want it to turn off all the lights, so I've got I would say that, and it would turn out all the lights, but then how do I know when it was done turning out all the lights? Because at the end of it, I would throw in a little command for it to speak, goodbye, Monroe. And I've trained her to recognize my voice specifically. So I can give her that command, and then she says that. Same thing when I say good night or good morning, she'll use my name because I taught her to do that. It just makes it sound a little more like it's intelligent when I know it isn't. It's just software. Plus, I've watched a lot of science fiction and science programs, so I know just the right nuances to look for to think of something as sentient or not, as intelligent or not. So it's a matter of perspective. I've been around for a number of years, 68 plus. I grew up here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I actually was born in Miami, and then at 7 I moved to Fort Lauderdale. Lived here all my life, but I've been all over the globe. Spent more than a few days, sometimes weeks, in a variety of countries and many states within the U.S., and sort of entrenched myself into certain environments. I spent a month at a military base in the UK, so I not only got to understand how they did things at the military base, I got to understand a lot of UK social customs. Some of that's worn off, some of it might still be there, I don't know. But I've also been to China and seen a lot of the social activities that go on there and distinguish those from what goes on in the US. I've also learned a bit and been exposed to a variety of spoken languages and written languages, and recognizing symbolic languages versus Latin lettering languages versus Greek languages, and how all those social customs and business operations and governmental systems and the behaviors of people in that environment. And then, to learn something new every day kind of thing. I've learned many higher level programming languages, machine languages, and actually some custom bit slice engines that don't exist anymore, but they had their own programming languages. They were dedicated for special purposes. So to say that it's human nature to segregate things, it actually is something that we carry with us genetically that we have to be aware of and work against. It's a protection mechanism and an ability to secure scarce resources. So, if another group of people are, maybe several thousand years ago were considered hostile because they were different, that meant I need to sequester my stuff so that they don't take it. because we were a lot more warlike back then because nobody thought about it. It's just, you've got food. It's much easier for me to beat you up and take your food than it is for me to go out and actually go find some food and get it. Or you're growing food. You're an agrarian culture. I'm going to wait until your crop's available and in your storehouse, and then I'll just go raid your storehouse. So people separate and segregate based upon protection of scarce resources. And that's not really the case anymore. So we still have to deal with it genetically. And there are edges of our social order, whether it be socialism, communism, totalitarianism, all these isms that have their far edges, but they also have soft edges, bringing them back towards the center. And, that's something we have to realize what we're doing there and how it affects everyone that's involved. So I'll just say that humans have to recognize and get past the barriers to us achieving any significant social improvement, sort of being more of a protector of our fellow human, as we're all in this together, we're all on the same planet together. So if humans are ever to successfully interact with extraterrestrials, if they're more open and embracing of each other, and they attempt to do that with us, and we suddenly go off on a protection and segregation rant, that would probably not be good for either of us. So rather than focusing on the differences between those living on this planet, let's focus on the commonalities of the Earth-dwelling species and know that extraterrestrials might have a different perspective, and we need to be ready to cope with that as a likely eventuality. So let's make some presumptions. Some may have read the Star Trek treatise on extraterrestrials, and it's basically about slightly different shapes of noses and foreheads in order to make the aliens palatable to television audiences. If they look too radical, they may not be accepted, at least back in the 1960s. I will note that on the Orville, they actually have a jelly blob alien that is intelligent and behaves differently, and it often apologizes for its behavior in the presence of humans. And so that's comical, but that's trying to reach to the next step and say, what if they didn't have a form like humans? What if they look more like green goo? But anyway, back to the commonalities. Let's just say if we look like this, then there's a reasonable presumption that they may look similar, but not identical. So there's this thing called bilateral symmetry. That is, if you sort of draw a line down the center of most animals on the planet, you'll see that the left side and the right side are pretty much the same. Now, if you go on the inside, you'll see that, oh, wait a minute now, you've got your liver over here and a kidney on each side, and not everything is the same. And if you look at a heart, it's got one side a little bigger than the other side, and so on the inside there are some symmetry differences. It makes us asymmetrical on the inside, but on the outside we have bilateral symmetry. Humans are upright and bipedal. Bipedal just means we got two legs. Upright just means we don't walk on all fours. We stand upright. We have two manipulator arms. Our arms and head are above our legs, which means we're not sort of looking down all the time. We're looking up and forward, and our head is at the top center facing in the direction that we're going to be moving. So if we go forwards, we're looking in that direction to protect ourselves from, I guess, falling down. I don't know. A lot of people get sprained wrists and broke arms because when they fall, instead of letting their head hit the ground, which they shouldn't do because that'll cause a concussion, they just sort of go hands flat, which causes the arms and the wrists to take the damage. We have relatively rapid locomotion compared with things like garden snails, turtles, and tortoises. But there are animals on the planet, typically the ones with 4 legs, they go much faster than us, including little squatty legs like alligators. We have rapid manipulator movement. We can reach and grab stuff very, very quickly. We can blow up, we can hold up a guard to protect ourselves. We can shoot basketballs. So we have rapid manipulator movement as compared with things like sea anemones and sloths. Our vision is forward-facing and stereo to give us depth. We don't have just one eye in the center of our head. We have 2, and it allows us to converge our vision to focus on a target in essentially 3D. And we have irises that allow us to adjust the light getting into our eyes so we can sort of cover our eyes briefly in the presence of bright light and then actually see in bright light. And when it gets dark, we have to take a while for things to open up and start gathering light, but we still can't see in total darkness. We have a good quantity of digits, 5, unless you did wrong in shot class or something. And we can grab things, so we can rotate our fingers around and grab stuff. And we have an opposable digit, which not only increases the grab, but allows us to rotate things, because as we rotate our hand, our thumb can lock onto it. Our reproductive organs are shaped and positioned for expedited and secure acts of procreation. This is basically a simple way of saying, if you look at other animals on the planet, sometimes they have to seclude themselves to protect themselves from hostiles, and we do it out of more embarrassment than anything else. People talk about the duration of procreation, and it's more about, I think genetically we're designed to do it quickly, because that way we can get back to battling the enemy, I guess. And rather than our young being in an egg external to our bodies, our gestation is internal to protect the offspring. But even though we're protecting the offspring, our legs still work, and we can run, which protects both the parent and the offspring until the actual birthing. So this is plus factors for us. We have a highly structured means of communication. We use acoustic utterances. Some people say words and sounds, but it's, you've got a speech box that's just going, very precisely. And you can do this singularly, as in I'm speaking to you, or you can do it in synchronized groups, a singing chorus, harmonic melodies. So even within all this commonality, there's the possibility for a wide range of variances. The differences that aren't all that different. Some people say that all of these differences that you see listed here would become irrelevant because they're all about people. As soon as we have something else to complain about. So epidermal pigmentation, the color of a person's skin, and whether it's that color but it's too light or too dark. Epidermal distinctions, moles, warts, skin tags, discolorations, birthmarks. We look at people differently based upon that. And we shouldn't, because ignoring the skin, they're still humans. I said fur, but some people say hair. Basically, the stuff on the outside of us that's curly and made out of expelled protein. There are people with hairy arms. There are people with bald heads, either bald because they choose to shave off their hair when it starts getting thin, or they're just bald. The ever popular ginger, as in what people in Great Britain call people with bright red hair. And then there's people with gray hair, whether it's gray because it's mostly been gray for a long time, or you've changed it to gray. Then there's hairstyles. If you see an audience of people and you see somebody with one of these hairstyles, that's an unusual person. Maybe because they want to be unusual, maybe because that's just how they wear it, or just they're trying to make some kind of statement. But there's a whole variety of hairstyles. And this is not just the simple styles. These are the polarizing styles, where you look different. Yeah, still human though. And then there's these styled hair colors. The blonde, the people that will tint their hair red or green or blue or pink or purple. And then the height and weight differences. That person's too tall. That person's too short. That person's too skinny. That person's too obese. Yeah, but they're all still people. And then in heads, the shape of a person's head, the size of their head, the position or size, or whether their nose is broken or pointy, or what their lips are. Their lips thin or thick, or is their mouth small, or is their mouth big? They're still people. Dental appearances. That person's teeth are straight, or they're not straight. Oh, they must have worn braces. They have nice straight teeth. They have a gap in their two front teeth. They have overbite. They have underbite. They're missing some teeth. Their teeth are not, perfectly white because they didn't go to the dentist and have them bleached. So that's just appearances. The length of locomotion and manipulator appendages. How long are those arms? Are you long and lanky, short, stubby? Have you had an unfortunate incident or a genetic problem and you're missing some parts of or all of your appendages? And then the acoustic communication. Oh, that person has a shrill voice. Or, boy, that's a baritone. You ought to be singing. Or a person who doesn't have a voice. And then all around the planet, different languages. Whether one group of people can recognize or deem another language unrecognizable. And then the writing and alphabets of them. And then the segregation or separation or distinction of that person's not from around here, or they're from over there. We've got to get past these things. And then, of course, the age bias. That person's too young to know that. That person's too old to deal with that. And then, oh, well, that's a man. He can do that. Oh, that's a woman. She can't do that. And then the modern non-gender specific appearance. If we recognize all of these as human differences that aren't all that different, if we suddenly encountered extraterrestrials that had differences that were no more different than any of this, would we have a problem with that? And if we have got a problem with this, and they were extraterrestrials, just the fact that they were from over there, plus all this other stuff, would say, yeah, humans would probably, at least 20, 30, maybe 50% would have a problem with, extraterrestrials that exhibited any of this stuff, plus being from another planet. So there are things that vary on Earth, but still stay the same. And I'll explain how still stay the same is really the same. So we have these things called extremophiles that are extremely different than humans. But they can live in environments where humans cannot live. For example, we live on the land and we have lungs. There are things that live in the sea that are aquatic and have gills. We can create technology that allows us to go underwater for limited periods of time. But we can't, without some environmental protection, survive in the environment where, quite a lot of species of fish and mammals have no problem surviving. Also, there's the variety of just the types of water that they live in. There are saltwater ocean creatures. There are freshwater creatures. There are, crabs like tidal pool creatures. And all of those creatures can live in environments that humans can't. Ambient pressure differences. There are creatures living at the bottom of the sea, the proverbial volcanic undersea vent creatures. And there are creatures that live on mountaintops, that the air is too thin, the pressure is too low, the oxygen level is too low for us to live there. Yet there's lichen and molds and things like that that have no problem growing on top of rocks where the oxygen level is very low because they get their energy from UV light. We saw some of this in Yellowstone. Then what about the extremophiles that live in extremely hot, acidic, volcanic springs? When I was at Yellowstone, I got to see some of those lovely colors. The water looks extremely clear blue, but don't dare stick your finger in there. The acid pH level is so high, it would rot it off in a second. And the water temperature is close to boiling. But unless you see, gas coming up through the water, it just looks like a very calm pool of very clear water with lovely colors. Totally inhospitable to human beings. There are molds that live on glaciers. You don't see them on top, but you break away the top layer of ice, and there are things living down there. And they live down there below the ice layer to protect themselves from icy winds and UV radiation. So life finds a way. And then the ambient level of light and the particular frequency of light. I already mentioned some things that are at high altitude that have no problem with UV, others do. There are creatures that live in dark caves, where there's no light. There's creatures that live way in the bottom of the ocean that not only can withstand the pressure, but also either can see very well because they have large eyes, like whales, or they have no eyes at all, and they just have tentacles that sense things in their area electrically and will grab them when they sense them. And that's how they feed. But all of these things, all these extremophiles, as well as all the other insects and animals and everything, all work from the limited protein count nucleic acids that make up DNA, although some viruses use RNA, to encode their structure and use it for reproduction, to make copies of themselves, even though some of these creatures use different genetic mechanisms for reproducing it, asexual versus sexual reproduction. And that's just normal on our planet. Imagine if extraterrestrial had some of these traits. What about the variability in intellectual capacity? I personally think that humans have a bias against too many life forms being recognized as intelligent and certainly not sentient, either because it reduces humans to just another intelligent creature on the planet, as opposed to the penultimate result of intelligence, or it disrupts the status quo of things like, oh, now I got to deal with interacting with them, which is more likely our posture. We will typically think that if we cannot communicate with a life form, it must have a lower mental capacity. And as we learn more about the other things that live on this planet, we realize that's not quite as wide a separation as we originally thought. But still, if we can sort of push them down in the intellectual capacity, we can still use them as a food source. So we should save the porpoises and whales because we know they're intelligent creatures and they have feelings and can be trained to do things. But cows and chickens, ooh, they're tasty because they're dumb. Some places consider dogs and cats as food, despite the fact that it's well recognized that we know that dogs and cats have emotions. They feel for their owners, maybe less for cats, but they feel for their owners, and they can be trained to do things. Maybe less so for cats, but they can be trained to use a bathroom, use their litter box. So they're intelligent, maybe not sentient, maybe not ticking off all 6 boxes, but as we look at other things, our definition of what isn't intellectual starts to become a little wishy-washy. We've done tests and found that an octopus can remember and recognize objects and can even distinguish one person from another, even when they're wearing the same diver suit. I don't know if that's the chemistry of the person in the water, their electrical charge, or how they look visually, but for its size, an octopus has a very large brain and very large eyes. Well, we know that we can teach chimps and apes sign language, so they're not as dumb as we once thought. The circus animals that we can teach chimpanzees to do tricks. Porpoises and killer whales have been taught to recognize and use symbolic keypads. With their snout, they can actually push and illuminate buttons to join thoughts together. And we know that porpoises and whales can see, navigate, and hunt acoustically in limited visibility water. We also know that they can put out an acoustic shock wave that will stun fish to make it easier for them to eat them. And we've actually seen videos of porpoises that will knowingly stun fish and then bat them about playing with them. So playing with toys. Don't play with your food. We've seen videos of animals and insects and birds creating and using tools. You've seen chimps that will take a stick, clean the stick off, and then use the stick down an anthill to get the ants out to eat them. We've seen birds using sticks to basically manipulate things to make their nests. And we've recently come to learn that certain birds can actually see the Earth's magnetic field lines and navigate by them. We've often thought, well, it's kind of like they have a compass in their head. Well, it turns out they actually have detectors in their retina that can sense magnetic, low levels of magnetic fields. So they may actually perceive visually magnetic field lines and can see which way north is. Although when the Earth's magnetic field flips, that might be a problem for them. I don't know if people have seen this. Let's see if I can bring this up.
Sulphur-crested cockatoos around Australia are learning how to get into your rubbish bins. And I think it's about time I came clean. I taught them how to do it. With this. Say hello to the Bin Chicken Training Aid, your tool for turning even the dumbest flying bolt cutter into a trash can terror. Its patent-pending flap faithfully recreates the experience of raiding a real-life rubbish bin, so your local cockies will be adapt in no time. Available for a limited time only with 4 easy payments of $99.69. Act now to avoid. Okay, so I didn't teach all the cockatoos how to get into rubbish bins because, well, they figured it out themselves. Parrots are among the smartest birds in the world, and sulphur-crested cockatoos are notoriously tenacious, able to achieve their goals through cleverness and carnage. And thanks to a multi-year study by Australian and German ecologists with the assistance of the public, they've been documented to learn these skills through social interaction, observing and then passing on the newly learnt skills to others. And this is different to the OG bin chickens or Australian white ibis, who just by chance had a beak shape perfectly suited to rummaging through bins. Cockatoos are using their intelligence, problem solving, and social interaction to figure out this new skill. And, well, personally, I'm not surprised to hear this. I've been putting this intelligence to the test with a series of puzzles for some time now with the help of this boy, Popeye, a wild sulphur-crested cockatoo, and yes, for everyone wondering, he is absolutely still around and visits us regularly, but I can assure you that Popeye isn't completely dependent on our handouts. I only give him small amounts of seed and apple now and then, and we've been away for weeks at a time sometimes, with him coping just fine. With the paper's findings, which is well worth a read, I wanted to conduct my own mini experiments and observations with the following goals. Number 1. Can the learnt behaviour be replicated on a smaller scale, and if so, how long does it take the birds to figure it out? Number 2. Can I document evidence of other birds observing and learning from the skills of another? And number 3, what approaches could be taken to prevent the birds getting into the puzzle once they know that there's a chance of a reward? And to test, I designed this, the bin chicken puzzle. Here's how it works. The puzzle resembles a miniature Australian rubbish bin with a red top, which has a raised internal shelf to hold a small amount of sunflower seeds as a reward. There's a single small tab which must be delicately manipulated to open the lid past a certain point, where it will swing open due to gravity. In addition, I've designed in large holes which can be used to lock the lid closed using a variety of means, and I'll be testing to see what, if any, method works to keep them out. As always, our first test subject is Popeye. He's a lot more comfortable with us these days, but still incredibly cautious, and that caution is seen here as he approaches the brand new puzzle. There's already a link between things I put on the balcony and the possibility of food, which is probably why he cares about it in the first place, but he can't see the reward through the red lid. So I would say his interactions with it are very investigative, but not determined, and he ended up leaving it unsolved. A few days later, he returned, and I set the puzzle up the same way, with a few seeds in front to perhaps hint at the puzzle containing more. Once again, he's curious, but not too invested. In the paper, the researchers were undecided whether cockatoos begun the behaviour of opening bins because they found an open bin with food in it by chance, or investigated one just for fun. To see if the open bin theory had merit, I tried presenting it to him in this way, and Popeye beelined for the seeds. I've already established in previous experiments that these birds have a very good grasp of object permanence, that is, an understanding that objects continue to exist even when they cannot be seen, and now by establishing that this closed puzzle does indeed contain a tasty reward, his interactions after I close it are decidedly more invested. And well, there you have it. That was Popeye in real time figuring out how to open the lid to gain access to the reward inside. It's not as involved as opening a full-blown bin lid, but still required a bit of finesse and a little bit of extra assistance with his foot. He polished off the seeds, then continued to investigate for a short time further, before then deciding to close the lid again and head off. With there now being a connection between the puzzle and tasty seeds, I decided to test him again on a particularly windy day, with dowels blocking the lid from opening. It's probably been a good 6 months since Popeye has seen one of the previous puzzles which used these dowels, but very clearly still recognises their purpose, removing 2 in very quick succession. Takes him a bit because he seems distracted by something, but he does eventually remove all remaining dowels. But then he walks away from the puzzle instead of opening it. And this is why. We have a new visitor. This is Prince. While Popeye is our regular loner parrot, Prince has been appearing now and then recently on his own or in a flock, and we named him Prince for a reason. He thinks he runs the joint and deserves all the treats. But he hasn't really earned it. Unlike Popeye, Prince is incredibly tame and not afraid of humans at all, which probably means he's fed by a range of people in the neighborhood, and he's clearly a dominant bird. But what about the puzzle? Well, initially, he doesn't care about it at all. Instead, he just kind of sits next to it as if to say, "Feed me, you monster." As Prince scoured the balcony though, Popeye did actually approach the puzzle again, cautiously, but he didn't attempt to open it. At the time, I figured he might have forgotten that seeds could be inside. Remember, the lid is opaque. But now I'm really wondering if he chose not to open it so Prince wouldn't see that it contained food and so outcompete him. I'm not sure. What do you think? Either way, Popeye did get bored and left, leaving Prince to chill. And then this happened. I'm not sure why he waited and showed zero interest in the puzzle till this point, perhaps again trying to keep it to himself, or maybe just being opportunistic and looking for free floating seeds, but his technique of flinging the lid open is different and faster than Popeye's more cautious foot-assisted method, and he does it first try. I feel like he's done something like this before, but I promise you, this is the first time he's interacted with this puzzle design. What he clearly hasn't done before, however, is solve puzzles involving dowels. I reinserted two that hadn't been flung off the balcony, and it resulted in the biggest tantrum I've seen for some time. I've gotten pretty good at making puzzles parrot-proof, but damn is he trying, using that huge beak as a lever to try and pry the stuck lid open from every possible angle. Eventually, his flailing knocked out the final dowel purely by chance, and it takes him a bit of time to realize he'd actually solved it. But then I just had to go and make an enemy for life by closing the puzzle again in his face. Twice. Yeah, if looks could kill. While the dowel provided some challenge, I felt they fall out too easily on their own, and after leaving the puzzle alone for just a couple of minutes, I came back to this naughty boy who had literally torn one of them in half. So I instead opted for sticks. These sticks have been cut in such a way that they can only be removed in one direction and come from the trees that the birds roost in. I just found them on the ground, so they're safe for the cockatoos to handle. I'm really curious to see what techniques they use to remove them, so for this version of the puzzle I also designed in a new feature, Puzzle Cam. This is an Insta360 Go 2, an absolutely tiny action camera, and I've designed slots for clear acrylic panels in this puzzle to give us a first-person view of what it truly is like to be a puzzle. Our first volunteer is Prince, and he spares no time in figuring it out. First, a cheeky try at the lid, but it won't budge. Then he investigates the sticks blocking its path. Some people commented on previous videos of me testing these birds that things requiring pulling are naturally easy for cockatoos, and I do have to agree. It seems to be the motion they're most comfortable with, and he yeets that first stick without a care. But the second won't pull out in that direction. It's pretty incredible just how much dexterity they have with that beak and tongue. It's like another foot. He spins the stick around trying to figure out just how to free it. He tries another cheeky grab at the lid, but nope. And then a lucky pull. Showing the ultimate laziness, he tries opening the lid from the rear, but failing that, he's in. And also, is it just me, or does the puzzle cam feel a bit like that scene in Jurassic Park where the T-Rex rips the roof off the toilet block and eats the lawyer? Truly horrifying. As he enjoys his reward, I retrieve the sticks from downstairs and reset the puzzle to see how much quicker he could solve it, but something odd occurred. When solving puzzles with Popeye, he is usually incredibly twitchy and cautious, flying off at the slightest sign of a threat. But Prince is usually super dominant and tame. So what happened here? Now, I don't think I spooked him, but instead perhaps the clear lid is acting like a mirror as it opens, flashing an image of themselves along with the sun and startling the bird. Something similar occurred later that day with Popeye visiting when I repeated the experiment, so after this test I swapped back to the red opaque lid. Now, if you don't want your house to get destroyed, it's a pretty good rule not to feed the flock. Single cockatoos that come now and then I might give a treat to, but in large groups they are incredibly naughty and destructive. Still, I've noticed that small numbers will congregate on our balcony on occasion, usually after a big storm or in the evening, almost like we've become a meeting point before they head off to roost. And one cold evening, I was presented with the perfect opportunity to test and observe just how cockatoos learn from each other. This group was comprised of 8 individuals, with Popeye and Prince among them. But as usual, Popeye was pushed to the edge of the group and outcompeted at every opportunity. Poor darling. In a scientific paper, Clump hypothesizes that larger dominant male cockatoos were more likely to open bins. That aligns with my observations here. Prince is clearly dominant in this situation. All the cockatoos know that humans mean food, but he knows the puzzle means food too, moving in to solve the puzzle, while other members of the flock wait back and observe. I love this little interaction, how he shows a little bit of dominance to the clueless onlooker, as if to say, out of the way mate, I got this. While he went to work, the birds all kept distance, but watched intently, only moving in after he solved it, and the reward was accessible. Remember, in a span of only a few weeks and a handful of interactions, Prince went from treating the puzzle like it didn't exist, to acting like a frustrated child, to skillfully solving and opening it with a very defined twist and slide solving technique, one of which other cockatoos have since begun to try adopting, albeit less elegantly. But they are trying, they just need more practice, which definitely hints that they're learning from observing. But what if you don't want them getting into your bins? How do you stop one or more of these tenacious birds once they figure out that your trash might mean food? Well, I tried a few things. Sticks or dowels are no challenge for the birds. Once they have the technique down, they will twist and pull until they remove it. Sometimes it takes them a bit longer if they get the direction wrong first try, but overall all the birds now make quick work of them to get inside. How about some string with a knot? Well, unless you're willing to tie a knot that you can't even undo, that's no use either, as it seems cockatoos are also quite skilled at undoing them. This was this bird's first attempt. Heck, I even tried bribing them with a promise of free seed for life if they just redeemed the coupon, but they threw my generous offer back in my face. His loss. I mean, that silly bird could have had seeds for life. But, I guess he knows I'll just cave and do it regardless. But don't despair, for there is one method of discouraging these birds that I've discovered, and it works so well, yet I haven't really seen anyone try it. This is the Punishment Parrot. Some time ago, I discovered purely by chance that the cockatoos hate plush toys. I mean, really, really hate them, and are incredibly cautious of them. It does seem to matter what kind of plush toy it is. They find some less intimidating than others, but this adorable Australian-made plush of a crimson rosella absolutely freaks them out. On some occasions, I've had to disperse a large number of birds. For example, they've seen me giving Popeye a treat and then descended from the heavens and then push him out. So I introduced them to the Punishment Parrot, and it works every single time. And you can see here with the parrot now, he won't even approach the puzzle and sits at the far edge of the balcony, just stunned. And eventually, he just leaves. So if you don't want your fly screens destroyed or your balcony chewed on, for a start, don't feed them, ever. But if they have associated your balcony or bins with food, then I would recommend some kind of brightly coloured plush toy and something reflective that moves, because after some research I found out that's already a popular method of discouraging birds. My warning here though is that they're so damn clever, they wouldn't leave the deterrent out all the time, as they might figure out that it's actually not a real threat, so use sparingly for maximum effect. If you have any other suggestions though, please do share them in the comments below, because cockatoos really shouldn't be rummaging through rubbish bins. If you enjoyed this video, maybe consider subscribing, and if you'd like to test out your own parrots with the Bin Chicken education system, you can find links in the video description, as well as links to the various resources I've mentioned in this video. I also post more bird content on my second channel, so there's that, but either way, thanks for watching. Bye.
So if we're now finding that birds are smart and birds originated from dinosaurs, then that might mean that dinosaurs might have been a lot smarter than we think they were. Because we've always thought, big dinosaur, small brain, must not have been very smart. A bird's brain is not that large, and we have in the past thought of them as being not that smart. Thus the phrase bird brain. But now we're finding out, some birds are rather smart despite their brain size. So the number of neurons or the amount of ounces or grams of brain size may not be the end all to deciding if something's intelligent or not. So now imagine other options. Let's just think about some variations on a theme, so to speak, and say, what if there were extraterrestrials and they wanted to visit Earth and they found that the atmosphere and the temperatures were compatible and they could learn to speak human languages, except that they were much taller than us? How would we respond to that? Oh boy, you're tall. That's a lanky alien. They may be offended by it. Or if they were really short, if they were slender, or if they were very rotund, if their skin was a different color and they saw how we treated people with different colors of skin, how would they decide to deal with us? What if they had skin that was scaly and we're not? They might want to be, find it okay to be with us, but we might have a problem with them. How would they see that? Different cranium features, different color eyes. What if they laid eggs and saw that we were live birthers and that we had a problem with egg layers because we typically cook those sunny side up? What if they had a pouch for the development of their young, and we saw that only a few animals, they saw that only a few animals on the planet, marsupials, had a pouch for the development of their young? We look at it as that's not a very advanced form of gestation, and we do it much better. So how would they feel comparing it to us? Most of our teeth, at least humans, are relatively flat. We don't have beaks. We don't have multiple rows of teeth. We have an upper and a lower, but we don't have cascaded teeth. A lot of animals on the planet have spiny teeth. If their teeth were spiny and they saw our teeth, how would we be receiving them? Fingernails. Our fingernails are relatively flat. Dogs, cats, and birds have round fingernails. They have hook fingernails for grabbing things. If they only had 3 fingers or 4 fingers, and we had a thumb, how would they think we would respond to something that didn't have a thumb? Would we think of them as being less because they didn't have a thumb? So none of these are insurmountable barriers and have nothing to do with intellectual capacity or the potential for technological advancement. But if they came here with these differences, would they, from seeing how humans behave based upon the differences that are here already, would they feel that maybe we're not, maybe we would treat them with hostility as so different when they're not that different? So why would they be so different from us? Or why would they be any different from us? The genetics basically map onto the requirements of their environment. So if, for example, I was an extraterrestrial and I lived on a planet that was circling a blue or blue-white type of star, I would see a lot more blue in the sky, a lot less red, and my perception range would be shifted towards blue. I might be able to see deeper into UV than humans, but I might not be able to see the color red at all. So when people start talking about infrared that humans can't see, but they talk about a color red, extraterrestrials may go, I don't see it. I don't know what you're talking about. Would they think humans are cuckoo? Or would they realize that, well, different spectra for different genetics? And if they are exposed to a lot of UV, their skin might have a darker pigmentation and be thicker and harder, almost, maybe shell-like, leathery compared to humans. And how would we respond to that? On the other hand, if they live on a planet that circled an orange or a red star, they would see a lot less blue light, and their visual perception would be shifted towards red. They would be able to see deeper into infrared than humans, but might not be able to see the color blue at all, certainly not anything in UV. And given the lower levels of intense radiation, their skin might be thinner, bordering on transparent, maybe without any pigmentation, because we have the pigmentation to deal with the UV light. So if their skin was normally see-through and our skin is opaque, except for you can see vessels, how would we respond to them? I remember in the Green Lantern movie, they made a note of pointing out that one of the aliens had skin bordering on transparent, and they thought that was really odd. But the normal thing of, he had muscle fibers that were similar to us, he had organs that were similar to us, he had 2 eyes, nose, mouth, 2 arms, 10 fingers, 2 legs. There was so much the same that, that little difference was the only thing they focused on. So a smaller planet would have lower gravity. Lower gravity might mean that our gravity might be too heavy for them. They might have difficulty moving around. Then again, if they live on a larger diameter planet, their beings might be shorter, sturdier, and have stubby fingers, but they would be able to press a lot more weight than humans because that would be their normal. It's kind of like us when we go up to the International Space Station. The reduced gravity, we start to have our muscles atrophy because we're not under 1G gravity doing things with them all the time. So they may find that our planets, they start to lose their muscular nature and they can't exist on our planet for very long, not because they can't breathe our air, but because the gravity is so much less than theirs. But their planet may have a lower air pressure. If it's a lower air pressure, even though the chemical composition was the same, 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, roughly, there's some inert gases in there too. But if their air pressure was lower, their chests might be bigger. And when they came to Earth, they might have, either trouble breathing or, get lightheaded from the excess pressure. And given the difference in air pressure, their vocal range may be, if their pressure is higher, their vocal range may be much lower pitched. So they may be below baritone, and we may have difficulty hearing them. And, speech for them may be different than speech for us. So how would they communicate with us? Well, they may have to use written language, but they'd learn our language and we'd have to learn their language, and that's a complication. So let's say they're more capable than us. let's say they have a physiology that, higher pressure and temperature is no problem for them. So, they could go take a dip in the ocean, so to speak, and swim down to several hundred feet without scuba gear. That wouldn't be a problem for them. But let's say the air pressure is lighter on their planet, they would have no problem going to, maybe Mount Everest without oxygen, whereas we couldn't. So they may have a freer reign on our planet than we do on our planet. And that would be an advantage for them over us. Their retina may be higher resolution. They may have more cells in their retina, kind of like some birds, that allow them to see more detail that we don't see. So they may be saying, don't you see the edge on that? The edge on that's a little curve. And we'd go, edge on what? So they may have advantages over us visually. They may be able to, if they're really extraterrestrials and they're familiar with other extraterrestrials, they may think human languages are trivial. You ought to try the language from that planet over there. So they may have no problem with our languages and all the different symbols and alphabets we use. But the vast majority of humans might not make the effort to strive to do more with what they have. And the extraterrestrials may become frustrated with them not wanting to do better and be better. And they may find that humans become hostile towards them because of our inferiority complex. We might become defensive. How would they respond to that hostile behavior? They may say, I think I'm going to back away for a while. So what if their social systems were different than ours, and it made it where it was difficult to comprehend how some of our social norms they either have never experienced or they're experienced so long ago and they intellectually just went, that's just dumb. Let's stop doing that. In the last 50 years, there were a number of things in human society that we've realized, yeah, that was dumb. Let's stop doing that. Stop mistreating certain people. Stop, segregating certain people. Stop mistreating women. It's just, if you've been around longer, you learn these things. And if you've been around even longer, you may never have experienced such oddball behavior. So how would you respond to that? Would they find that humans could live in peace with them? Or would they find that, much like we go, who'd want to live there? We become hostile towards them. And how would they deal with that hostility? Given the comparison that they may be more capable than us, they may have more knowledge and capabilities intellectually than us, they may be socially more advanced than us, and if humans were presented with that, they may find us not to their liking, they may find us distasteful, backwards, but if they are really that advanced socially as well as intellectually, they will treat us like we treat some societies on this planet, where we used to go visit the natives in some forest, only to find out that we messed them up so badly by trying to teach them and educate them as to our customs that we now realize we're no longer going to do that. We'll just fly drones over them and observe them from afar. So maybe that is something we're learning that they're already aware of and are already practicing this. They may have early on interacted with humans, and we got to a certain point where our technology would allow them to harm them, and therefore they went, okay, it's time to back off. So if they're there, the reason why we haven't heard from them is deliberate, as in, yeah, until you guys settle down a bit, we're going to keep our distance. But now that we've advanced a little further and we're maybe showing some signs of progress, they're starting to show us themselves like, hi, we're here. So as I've said before, that's dropping the duck blind posture. When hunters go to hunt animals, they don't want to be seen and recognized and frighten the animals away. So they put up a duck blind, which is usually something that looks like the natural environment, but hides the humans, typically so they can shoot them. But more often than not nowadays, luckily for the animals, it's to take videos of them in their natural habitat. Well, it would be within a advanced extraterrestrials capability to observe us in our natural habitat. But now they found out, we can take a little bit of advancement. So, hi, we're here, but we're not actually going to interact with you. We're just going to show you our ships and go, catch us if you can. So there are a couple of prognosticators of extraterrestrial existence that you may have heard of. One is called the Fermi Paradox. It's basically saying, if there were any extraterrestrials out there, we would have seen them by now. This is under the presumption that the extraterrestrials would want us to see them. They may say, I'll wait for you to mature a little bit, and then I'll see you. They may find that our biases, our war, our profiteering, our industrial espionage, make it where they're going to keep their distance for a while. There's another thing called the Drake equation, named after a guy named Drake, obviously, like the Fermi Paradox is named after a guy named Fermi. This is that long formula that attempts to calculate the odds of there being extraterrestrial, technologically advanced civilizations just in our galaxy. When they first did these numbers, we didn't have data that said exoplanets exist. We just assumed there's lots of stars out there. Maybe we're the only solar system with planets that might be habitable to humans. So early on, the numbers for the Drake equation didn't come out all that promising. Maybe we were the only thing out there. Maybe there is nobody else out there. But now, as we've learned that there's billions more stars just in our galaxy, and there's billions more galaxies in the universe, and we've discovered thousands of exoplanets, and we've discovered dozens of exoplanets, even around non-yellow stars that are in habitable zones for water or the potential for life. Maybe they are out there, and they aren't just later stage microbes. They are actually intelligent and maybe have some similarities to us. So we always think about the 4 billion years of our planet, solar system existence, but that's only because we're around this yellow dwarf star. There are other slightly redder, but not really red, orange stars that might be many millions to maybe a billion years older than our star, meaning they could have planets that are millions of years longer in existence than the Earth, which would not only give them a few years head start, if they didn't go through the 5 extinction level events that we've gone through, they may be certainly many thousands of years more advanced than us, but millions of years. And if they are, and they saw us, early on, they may have tried to help us, advance us, but then they went, sorry, too warlike, too aggressive. We're gonna back off for a while until they get a little farther along. But our presumption that there's nothing more intelligent in the universe than us simply because of our specific longevity and events, and how long have humans been here on this planet. Seems like kind of arrogant that because we haven't seen them yet, they must not exist. So here's where the other one comes in, the zoo hypothesis. This is basically saying, yes, they're more advanced than us. Yes, they've advanced their technology far beyond ours. Light speed is not a problem. But they're just watching from a distance and waiting for us to cook a little longer. And then they'll come by and say hello, even though when they do come by to say hello, we might be a little less technologically advanced, or, we're getting there. Maybe a little help from them would be helpful, but not quite yet. So if we start eliminating some of the issues we have down here, we might see who comes for dinner. Thinking back to the 2 movies that were once made. So they may be looking for us to do something before they make the next step towards contact. In Star Trek, they have this approach that as soon as a civilization develops warp speed, they must be sufficiently advanced for first contact. Hopefully it's not warp speed, because we're not there anytime soon. But is it a singular technological advancement that they're looking for? Check this and only this, or maybe it's some movement in a direction. You got to have at least these 5 things. Kind of like what we do with sentient. It's not really sentient until it can do these 6 things. Well, there may not be a hard boundary. It may be just you show these inclinations, and now you look like you're good enough to contact us. But maybe we've already gone through a couple of those steps, and they're kind of dropping the duck blind to tease us into creating something more advanced. Like, you can't catch our spaceships now because we know we're more advanced than you, but the fact that we're going to tease you with bring out your best and fastest, and we just go, we're gone. Now maybe you'll develop new technology that catches up with us. Kind of, we're pulling you to the future. Who knows what that thing was that allowed them to drop the duck blind? It could be something as straightforward as, look, humans have discovered the existence of gravity waves and can detect them. I guess it's time for dropping the duck blind. So who knows what we will just roll past, and they'll go, time to contact them now. Don't know what it is. They don't put out a handbook. So what kind of technological demonstration would they be looking for? Fusion? Fusion becoming the dominant power source? We have recently showed some movement towards fusion ignition. Sharing infrastructure. Are they waiting for us to have a worldwide power grid or water grid or communications grid? Are they waiting for us to get smart enough to do away with the silliness of fission for power generation and warfare? Are they waiting for something subtle like humans banning internal combustion engines in favor of electric vehicles by a certain date to reduce global warming, because they don't want the humans to ruin the planet just about the right time to start using it? Superconductivity has always been on the edge. AI, we're waiting for it to advance just a little further. We've made some advances in quantum computing. Maybe they're waiting for us to solve a worldwide problem, and they go, oh, well, now you've gotten smart enough computers. Now we can start talking to you. Maybe they're waiting for us to get rid of the silliness of radio communication, modulation of the electromagnetic spectrum. And I don't mean lasers. I mean maybe gravity waves. Learning that you can modulate gravity waves for communication in deep space. Maybe they still have the light speed problem, but they could certainly make a signal go farther with less distortion. Maybe we have to come up with interdimensional travel to circumvent the light speed limitation of the old warp drive plateau. Or maybe it's something as simple as finally realizing that there's life elsewhere in our solar system. You know, we find bacteria on Venus, or we find something living in the, you know, low-level life living in the methane gas of Titan, or something, even if it's fish or bacteria, living in the undersea salty oceans of Enceladus or Europa. Like I said, until they give us the handbook, we don't know what boxes to check. But they're keeping that under wraps. Maybe they're waiting for a social demonstration. Until these guys learn how to stop trashing their planet, we're not going to give them the time of day. Or once they get rid of their nukes, then, you know, we'll think they're smart enough now and talk to them. And one of the things that UFOs love to go visit is nuclear launch silos and nuclear stockpiles. There's maybe a clue there. Maybe they're looking for more openness. Like, you know, once these people start getting rid of their race and gender and nationality and, you know, upper class, lower class kind of biases, then it's time to make first contact. But without the handbook, we don't know. Learning to advance everyone educationally and to provide everyone with health care. Maybe it's something as simple as that. Or maybe it's deploying a financial model that's more of a level playing field for all, instead of good for the rich, bad for you. But I wish they would leave the handbook lying around. Maybe it's, you know, another copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls has it written down and we can follow that. But how would an extraterrestrial learn about humans? We're no secret. Even if they can't see us individually from light years away. The presence of large salty oceans says there may be life on that planet. Changes to the land changes the atmosphere. Clearing land, agrarian civilizations, that, you know, changes the land itself from being predominantly green to maybe being more orange, you know, clays and things, or dark for organic earths for growing things. But as our industry takes more and more dominance, they may see our planet changing from green to gray, as in cement. We have industrial advancements that change the actual composition of the atmosphere. More CO2 or more electromagnetic radiation, which may be a sign that there be some industrial types there, even if we didn't send out radio signals to ETs, which we have. Wars produce indications. The concussion waves, the flashes, bursts of radiation, unusual gases, you know, but they may not be able to detect them individually. They can just see occasional changes. All of these are detectable in electromagnetic spectrum, either optically or spectroscopically. They may be seeing this from many light years away and go, almost time. Here's a perspective. When we look at the light from exoplanets, we're seeing into the past. When they look at light from our planet, they're looking into our past. So if neither side can break the light speed travel barrier, we may look dumb and backward for a long time. So what's holding humans back from making these advancements? How do we show up on the good side, make it to the good list instead of the bad list, so they might want to come by and say hi? If you've seen some of the recent indications of the possibility of life on places like Venus and Mars, we're amazingly skeptical. It's not that we did detect or we didn't detect. It's no, you didn't. Okay, because once the boundary's been crossed and we realize life is possible, even if it's primitive life, elsewhere besides the Earth, some may start to doubt certain systems of belief. And if we take that out further and say maybe they have a multi-million year head start on us, we're no longer unique. We're certainly not superior. The only remaining barrier for advanced life beyond Earth is our self-uniqueness. Either that or it's just dogma saying, nope, nothing out there, nothing to see. Movies like Contact or Independence Day got it wrong. Our radio and TV broadcasts have not really made it more than about 100 light years, and there's billions of light years out there. So if there were extraterrestrials detecting us, they would have to do it indirectly by, light shining through our atmosphere, courtesy of our sun, and they do spectral analysis and they go, hey, lots of water there. 20% oxygen, that may be enough. Then they may come and visit us and go, okay, we've done some remote study and realized not yet. Maybe we'll study them closer, but not yet. And like I said, they may have millions of years head start on us. So do not presume that extraterrestrials can't do what humans can't do. They may have conquered faster than light travel a long time ago and are waiting for us to figure it out too. They may have actually worked with us early on. And if you ever watch the Ancient Aliens series on History Channel, a lot of it is, as the saying goes, malarkey. But there's some of it that you go, how did they do that? And it's not just lifting rocks, it's things like drilling perfectly circular holes in rock when all you had was copper chisels and no motors. How'd you do that? We had help. So if we just, ignore the extraterrestrials and just say, let's be better here, maybe that's the signal to say, okay, now that they're doing better to themselves, it's time to pay them a visit. Or maybe we have to detect life elsewhere. But once we, check off the number of boxes, they'll drop by next Thursday. Until then, we have two things to do. Be more worthy and party on. So at the moment, we're not worthy and we're partying too much. That may be their view from above. Did I touch on the extraterrestrial point of view, or did I say too human?
I would say too human.
Okay.
If you're voting, is anybody else voting?
Yeah, I would say we don't have the mineral content that makes it worth it to vaporize us yet.
Yes, seriously. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we have to wait a little bit until we are more civilized.
We're not cooked yet.
Right.
We're not fully cooked.
Now, did you make any statement about that? Maybe some of the creatures that you mentioned at the beginning could actually be alien?
Yes.
Okay.
Just like we have aliens on this planet, we call them extremophiles, and they can live in environments that humans can't. If the extraterrestrials happen to be of the extremophile nature, our planet may not be hospitable enough for them. But we go places that aren't hospitable to humans, and we wear spacesuits. So if the aliens dropped by and they were from a planet that their environment is hospitable to them, but our environment is alien to them, they may have to wear spacesuits all the time. How would we treat them?
But I meant like some of the creatures that we have on this planet seem like they came from another place.
Well, they all have DNA. They all have, bilateral symmetry for the most part. So
Oh,
they all seem to be derivatives of the life that's already here.
so
They're
you
not
don't
that.
think a species, you don't think an alien species would have DNA? That makes a difference?
No, no. I'm saying that everything we see on this planet takes a very limited number of proteins and uses it as a structural mechanism for producing copies of itself. So, everything we look at, except for certain viruses, are all based on DNA. And that's the genetic means of passing on a resemblance to your next generation. And even though there are wide differences in how the reproduction occurs, live birth, egg birth, pouch-based marsupials, it's all DNA. So if an alien species were to be egg laying, they could still be based upon DNA. But there are real extremophile studies in what extraterrestrials might be like. If you remember the movie Andromeda Strain, they postulated that life could be based upon crystalline structures rather than DNA. And, well, differentiation is a problem when you're a crystal, because a crystal basically says you're the pure form of whatever that is. So I would doubt that. But some have postulated that maybe silicon-based life form instead of carbon-based life form. Okay, maybe. But, they wouldn't have iron-based blood like us. There's the Star Trek Original Series episode where the Horta was silicon-based, and they had silicon spheres that were their eggs, and they look like a rough, shaggy carpet roaming around inside the rock. That was their attempt to make something look really alien. But
It did. It was a good one.
Yeah, I'm not sure how alien we can think things would be. Even Carl Sagan tried to say, well, what about in the high atmosphere of the planet Jupiter? Maybe there's aliens that just bob about and they're gas-based, and much like the bladder in a fish, they just go up and down in the atmosphere and they live within a tolerable range, and that's what they know their existence to be. Okay, and what do they feed on? Well, everything that we know of has to consume something that makes energy to allow us to sustain ourselves and to give us the extra energy we need for reproduction to occur. So what would they be getting out of the gas clouds of Jupiter? Radiation? Oh yeah, Jupiter has a very high magnetic field and radiation belt, so that's energy. That's lots of energy. So what would a creature look like if it fed on high energy radiation? I don't know. It depends upon, is it feeding on infrared, which is not that high in energy? Is it feeding on ultraviolet? Is it feeding on X-rays or gamma rays?
I hadn't thought of that as being an energy, but I guess it's like the sun does give energy to plants to be able to change the chemistry in there.
Yes.
And feed upon it. But, that's interesting.
Yes.
That light, you're saying a light source in a sense.
Well, electromagnetic radiation, and it's not from the sun, it's from the radiation fields of the planet.
Yes, I understand, but I was relating it to something that I understood that we did get energy from. That's not a.
Yeah. Well, I've often had this discussion with Helen of humans consume food, which we break down and produce energy, and that's what sustains us. But you know what? Even at room temperature, you feel fine. But as soon as you go take a nice hot or warm shower, you get that relaxation feeling. Is it that your body is taking in the thermal energy and reducing the workload on your organs to make energy? It's not that we're photosynthetic, but are we thermosynthetic? Do we take a little bit of that energy and use it as energy? And she says, no, of course not. Really? I don't know. I can't say no because, hot feels really good up to a point. I mean, even if you just put your hand in hot water, if it's not too hot, it feels good, like you're lightening the load somewhat. And is the body actually taking in that energy into the bloodstream to energize it? Because we know that if you have chemistry and you increase the ambient temperature, it can make the chemistry work better. So it could be that our blood actually works better at transferring energy to our bodies if it's just a little bit warmer, because we bleed out a lot of heat energy.
But not in Florida. It's too hot here.
Yeah, we maintain this, 98.6 body temperature. But if you ever were in an environment where the temperature was actually 98.6, it would be very uncomfortably hot because your body can't radiate the excess energy. We send a lot of energy to our extremities to make our fingers warm, but once your finger gets to a certain temperature, that energy has got to leave your body, otherwise you'd cook your fingers. And,
I have a concept.
Sure.
They may just be waiting for us to terraform the planet by global warming, or climate change, and then they say, "Oh, now it's ready for us."
Well, that's something that I've also considered. That's the resource abduction philosophy, where they're waiting on us to become a good food source or a good slave labor source.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're waiting for us to change the climate so that there's so much CO2 we can't exist because their planet has CO2 and that's where they need to exist.
Yeah.
And if you think about it for a moment, we don't know of any extraterrestrials within our non-light speed distance of Earth. So if they've conquered light speed as it's trivial to travel 1,000 light years in a very brief period of time because they've gotten past that infantile, space-time barrier thing, then they wouldn't have to wait for us to terraform our planet to match what they need. They'd just go find what they need elsewhere. If they needed a planet that had lots of fresh water, they could go to Enceladus and find far more water than there is on all of the Earth.
Yeah.
So
True.
we don't really have the resources that they could need. Now, the slave labor force, wouldn't they prefer us to be dumb and muscular? Because we're moving the other direction. We're moving more towards not having to do heavy menial labor for the most part, which reduces our muscularity, which means we're probably not as edible. And it also means we're not as good for slave labor. I personally know I find it unbearable to do the solar observing. I go find some shade because I've spent my career in office environments with air conditioning and it's just too hot out there. So, we're moving towards being unacceptable for food or slave labor.
True.
So they're looking for social life, to make some more friends.
I think that's actually what they would be looking for. Is they're looking for a species that gets it, that finally realizes their place in the universe and adjusts things to match as a species, as a whole, not as a country, not as a state, not as a nation, not as a hemisphere, but as a consensus of a planet, realizes that we're more alike than we are different. That's a good sign. if everybody were educated and provided health care, that gives us a much larger base of people capable of advancing our species. So if we start becoming clue-based as opposed to clueless, that may be enough for them to go, it's time, let's talk.
Unless they may want warriors to help them conquer the universe.
Okay, that's another thing is, if they're that advanced, they'd be warlike.
Yeah.
Okay, look at our history. As we've become more advanced, we're less tribal, but we still have wars. But that's because our society likes the profiteering of wars. We like wars because we make money off of them. We like volunteer armies because then only the right people might get, eliminated in battle, not the wealthy people. So, there are some aspects of our society that say we are learning. There are other aspects that say we're shaping it maybe the wrong direction for the extraterrestrials to go, you finally got it. Maybe it'll take some things to happen on Earth before we finally get it.
Yeah, so it seems suspiciously to me, Monroe, that you're an awfully nice person, that you could be making a hell of a lot of money consulting at $500 an hour, but you'd rather spend your time teaching other people about science, arranging classes for kids and stuff like that. And somehow your impression is that these aliens are going to be like that too. I'm just not entirely that optimistic. People are in Afghanistan now holding on to the wheels of airplanes so they can get away from what lots of people are like. And I'm not sure that a society, alien societies would really evolve to be that nice. And why would they, for example, wait until we have the capability for interstellar travel to make themselves known? Wouldn't it be just as likely that they would be trying to snuff us out before we had the ability to have interstellar travel?
A number of science fiction content has tried this tact. The old, you're an ant, I'm going to step on the ant before the ant bites me. Okay, that's a point of view, but that's a point of view of a human. As we go farther along in the existence of our society, we become less warlike, except for the wars where we make a lot of money, build a lot of big weapons, but the weapons don't destroy the planet anymore. When was the last time anybody used a nuke? It's a good threat, but we like the Moabs, the mother of all bombs, because it'll blow stuff up, but then we can go right back in afterwards.
Yep.
Gets rid of what we think of as the bad guys, the opposition. So we're still an opposition-based warrior society, but, there hasn't been a world war now in a long time. I'm not talking about the skirmishes of Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that, which are localized wars. They're not worldwide. They're not like it's all of us against all of them. Some may think that eventually that's what will happen is we'll have another nuclear war, and that will really set things backward. And then the next civilizations that come out of that will learn because they nearly destroyed themselves. Even in Battlestar Galactica, the original series, they tried to come up with an alien race that would be hostile to the superior race that was the forefront of the show. So they came up with this warring race that, was very warlike, but all the good guys needed was a little bit of technological edge, and they just decimated them and then moved on and ignored them. So, even Carl Sagan said, if they can master faster than light travel, getting rid of us before we have faster than light travel isn't worth their effort. We're no threat to them. But once we have faster than light travel, we become a threat to them, maybe, if we're still warlike. And that's the, what is the day the earth stood still.
That's right. Yes.
We were content to watch you when you were tribal amongst yourselves and warlike, but the moment that you came up with atomic power, we started watching you more closely, and now it looks like you might be applying atomic power to spaceships, and that's unacceptable. That may be what they're looking at. They're looking at us and going, okay, you got the nukes. They're not that big. You could have made bigger nukes. And then the Russians made the biggest nuke, and it even scared them because it started to produce radiation into the upper atmosphere above the height of the mushroom cloud into space, and it carried cesium across the entire planet. And we saw the cancer rates spike worldwide. And we said, that's too big. So we have built atomic weapons that both the US and the Russians went, no, that's too big. Which says, if an alien race really wanted to eliminate us, how would they do that? Well, they don't want to eliminate the planet. They still want it to be useful. They would probably use bacteriological warfare, because that'll wipe us out. And once we're gone, the bacteria will be gone because there's nothing left to infect. And oh yeah, COVID.
Yeah, maybe a nice virus. Yeah.
Yeah, let's dish them up a nice virus. Wait a minute, we didn't wipe out enough of them. Let's give them a couple of variants. See how they deal with that. And we're gonna watch and see what happens and how you behave. And if you don't go on the more rational side, and you start being belligerent towards masks and vaccines, and that's the kind of people that are higher probability to die of the virus, maybe that's the reshaping of society that they're looking for. Of course, that's just speculation. I have no evidence of it.
It came from a lab in outer space. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just a stockpile they have lying around going, let's see, number 19 seems to match you guys. Here, have some number 19. I mean, we've got this thing called CRISPR that allows us to modify the DNA of creatures to change things. And the thing we're most fond of is, let's see if we can make the fur of sheep glow green in UV light. Well, that proves that we did the genetic modification that we know we wanted to. If we made sheep with 5 legs, people would call us monsters. But if we make sheep that only glow in UV light that otherwise look normal, okay, yeah, you've proven you can modify to specific changes in the DNA exactly what you want. So
I have a friend who invented a chicken with 5 legs. He thought that would be good for marketing, but he could never catch it.
Yeah.
Well, you can make a chicken with really large legs and lots of breast meat. It's called an ostrich or an emu.
Yeah.
And they don't even fly away. But they can run a lot faster than humans. So, broaden our minds, as the saying goes. Or as the poetic saying is, there are more things in heaven and earth than you can dream of in your reality.